get to regenerate properly because they're eating late into the evening, which disrupts the sleep and repair process, which is the most important time for us as a living organism. Because we're born here, we die here, and every day we age a little bit more towards death. And then when we sleep, we can go back a little bit closer to birth. And so we go, and then we go back, and then we go, and then we go back. And this constitutes our life. But if we're constantly just sleeping like junk, we're going to go way forward and only go back a tiny bit each day on our road to death, as far as regenerating and improving our biologic function.
Hey friends, welcome to the HealthSimple Show. I'm your host, Kyle Reedhead, and I interview health and wellness experts from around the world to help you live healthy, happy, and stress-free. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and if you have any questions about anything we talk about through this episode, just comment below, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Enjoy the show. I'm super excited to have Matt on the show here. Matt, and actually it's a funny story how we met. If you guys remember the episode, I don't know what it was, somewhere in the 20s or 30s, with Ryan Carter. He runs a big Instagram account called Live Vitae. He actually saw that we were both here in Bali, so he reached out, told me to message Matt, and so we went out for some poke, which was really good, lots of tuna. And then if you guys follow me on Instagram, you would have seen I was hanging with Matt a few days ago, and he did a little takeover on my Instagram, spit some knowledge on sunlight. And so we promised that we would dive really deep into this topic here today. So that's where we're going to get started. Matt, before we get into anything, why don't you just explain what the light diet is? Can you do that for us?
I can do that for you. Yeah, the light diet is basically the first diet that is focused on the engines, which are mitochondria, these engines in our cells. And the reason the diet is focused on the engines in our body rather than on the food or the gas that's going into the engines is because it turns out, the research has shown in the last several decades, but more recently, there's a guy from Philadelphia named Dr. Doug Wallace who has definitively shown that the modern diseases that we're facing, the chronic diseases, including the biggest killers being heart disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, obesity, cancer, and so on, things like autoimmune diseases, autism, these are all chronic diseases, which are not genetic diseases. They're not like cystic fibrosis or Tay-Sachs or sickle cell anemia, which are definitively genetic diseases, of which there are very few known strictly genetic diseases. And then they're not also infectious diseases like typhoid, dysentery, syphilis, things like this. They're not infectious diseases. They're chronic. In other words, it isn't things that are killing us from the outside, like bacteria and viruses, like the Black Plague anymore. It's chronic diseases, which means our body's actually failing to function properly. So Dr. Wallace, who's the founder of the field of mitochondrial genetics, he's the guy who basically figured out that our mitochondria, these engines, get passed from our moms. He found that these diseases we're facing, the big problems, and this includes also smaller, lower level things like depression and anxiety, that people, not that they're small or low level, things that aren't considered maybe massive diseases. These are all linked to mitochondrial dysfunction. And what's happening is the tissues, whether it's the brain or the heart, in these tissues, the mitochondria aren't functioning properly. So we have all these people today, and this was sort of the birth of my journey. These people like in the paleo diet world, Rob Wolf, Mark Sisson, Chris Kresser, Dave Asprey, they're telling people that the story is, at least they have been for the last decade, telling people that the story is all about food and the gas you need to put in your body, and that if you improve this, that your diseases are going to go away. And they have little studies here and there that support their premises. But in reality, Dr. Wallace, who's on the path to win a Nobel Prize in medicine, has made it very definitively clear that these are mitochondrial issues in origin. And the reason this is important is because it turns out that it's not the food that goes into the engines in our body that actually determines how they function. It is certain factors in our environment, and the primary one being light and electromagnetic fields, of which light are light is a big part. And so when we change our light, for example, simple thing we could touch on is sleep. If we have too much light at night, it destroys our sleep, which destroys our mitochondrial function. And this is why poor sleep, or every disease, every chronic disease, is linked to poor sleep. So this is just a basic intro to what the light diet is. And on that note, actually, I have my glass doors closed, which is not good. You don't want to have glass filtering. I'm going to open it so I can get the full solar spectrum coming in and the nice breeze. So that's what the light diet is. Just to give a basic intro.
I love that explanation. And actually, guys, it's so funny. I was at just a beach club bar with, I guess you call it a bar, it's a pool, swim up area, whatever. And Matt met me there, and he actually brought a spectrometer so he could check out what the EMF, what the lighting was like in this place to see if it was good enough for his mitochondria, which was absolutely hilarious to do, but I love it. He's taking it to the next level. Can you dive into a little bit of what mitochondria is, just for those who don't know? I know you say it's the engine. What exactly does that mean? What do mitochondria do for us?
Totally. It's a great question. Mitochondria do everything for us. So basically, the premise is that biological evolution is something that did occur to the best of our knowledge. If someone disagrees with that premise, then we can talk about it from a different angle, just like what the current science shows. So the current science shows that the mitochondria are the engines in our cells. They basically, just like the engine in a car, they take a hydrogen-based fuel source, just like gasoline, petroleum is hydrogen-based because it comes from the crushed and decomposed remains of old life forms. That's why they call them fossil fuels. We use not fossilized hydrogen-based fuels such as what we call food. So plants, carbohydrates and fat found from plants and animals that ate the plants and processed them. And basically the fuel, this food, we put it in and it goes into our engines, and it's just like in a car's engine, it reacts with oxygen. Basically there's a little input of energy. Again, same like a car's engine, or same like a fire, an uncontrolled fire. It takes one little spark, which is just a little input of energy, and it causes hydrogens on these either sugar or fat backbones. They're on a carbon backbone, these hydrogen molecules. It causes them to break off the backbone. And so then these hydrogens can react with free oxygen in the air, which is present in a car's engine or in any fire. And anyone knows if you put a cup over a candle, the candle dies out because it burns out through all the oxygen. Same thing if your car engine couldn't get any oxygen in, it would not run. So we too, that's why we have to constantly be breathing all the time, because we're using a hydrogen-based fuel source, reacting it with oxygen on our mitochondria. And what happens is when hydrogen and oxygen come together, what does that make, Kyle?
Water.
Yeah, boom. So when we actually make water to generate energy as life forms. So that's the end product of our energy generation. So the mitochondria are the engines that let that happen. And it's the same thing in any fire. Anyone who's familiar with chemistry, the combustion reaction, you put together a hydrogen fuel source with oxygen, and then it makes water. And when water is formed, it's a very stable molecule. So basically, like there's a certain amount of energy present in these molecules, and then when they come together and react, they're satisfied, and then they release this energy. As a result, it's an exothermic reaction, meaning it releases energy, it generates energy, which is why we use it in life. And so that released energy from the one hydrogen bonding with, or two hydrogens bonding with one oxygen molecule, that provides enough energy it releases more than was initially put in. So it allows the reaction to continue. That's why all it takes is one spark to start a fire. Like if you just have, like, for example, newspaper and air, they're not going to react. All it takes is one spark, and then all of a sudden the entire newspaper will go up in flames. So that's the same thing that our mitochondria do, but instead of doing it in an uncontrolled fashion with just all the air reacting with all the hydrogen at the same time, it's very, very tightly controlled so that we can extract every single little bit of of the energy available in the difference between the hydrogen and the oxygen wanting to react.
Yes.
And this is why, if anyone's familiar with Wim Hof, the Iceman, who maybe you'll get on your podcast sometime,
hopefully,
he says we have like the inner fire, and that's what we need to cultivate. And it actually couldn't be more accurate, the inner fire. analogy that he talks about, because it's literally an inner fire that's going on within us. And when we go into cold water, we actually turn on. We not just turn on, but because it's always on. Otherwise, we're dead. We increase our metabolic rate to have basically more hydrogen reacting with more oxygen. This is why he has this breathing tactic that floods the blood with oxygen. And we basically have these things called uncoupling proteins in our engines called mitochondria. And the simple explanation is that they sort of put a little trick in the system that causes the system to start generating substantially more energy in order to not use the energy for normal stuff, but actually the result of generating so much energy is a huge amount of heat release. Because just like most engines in nature, this process of our energy generation isn't 100% efficient. What I learned in biology class in like 8th or like 12th or ninth grade was that it's only like 39% efficient. So the rest of that energy is released as heat. So if you massively upregulate the amount of energy being generated, you're going to be releasing a ton more heat. That's why when you exercise, you work out, you're forcing your body to create more energy, but you also become extremely hot because you're generating a lot more heat as a byproduct of increased energy generation. So that's the inner fire. That's basically, that's what the mitochondria do. They take fuel, utilize it to generate energy. And we have about 1,000 approximately mitochondria per human cell, which means, so again, a human cell is small. Mitochondria are the size of bacteria. They're much smaller. So again, 1,000 of these engines in each of our cells. And approximately they estimate that we have about 100 trillion cells in an adult human, which means 10 quintillion mitochondria approximately. So there's a lot of these engines inside of us, and they're very important.
Wow.
That's the non-evolutionary angle. That is just the non-evolutionary angle.
So for the listeners that may be too much chemistry for you, essentially the mitochondria is what you'll learn in school is the powerhouse of the cell. It provides your body with energy. And, the better or the more optimal that your mitochondria work, the better that you work. And the worse your mitochondria work, the worse that you function. So that's the very simplified version that I just want to make sure
they don't provide energy. I think you said they provide energy or generate, but they just basically extract energy that's available in the environment.
Yeah.
And the extent, the better they can do that, the better we work. So.
Okay, that makes sense. So now we've heard. I've heard quite a bit about mitochondria through some of the names that you had mentioned, and you're right. A lot of them do talk about mitochondria and improving your mitochondria or the way that they function through diet. But your idea and some of the researchers that you work closely with is through sunlight. Can you talk about the mechanism or how the sun is actually, how our mitochondria is responding to the sunlight, what that mechanism is?
Yeah, 100%. So just, I'll go on a bit of a tangent to start and provide a little story context. There is a guy named Dr. Jack Kruse, who I owe a lot of credit to for a lot of this information. He's a researcher and a big American neurosurgeon who's been studying these issues for a long time after he tried using diet to improve his own obesity as a neurosurgeon and was unable to do so. And then, no matter what he tried. And of course, the diet world will often bring up the argument, well, must just not have tried hard enough, right? Because that's their bias, but they're actually just not aware of what they're unaware of. And so he became a big part of this paleo diet community, which is exploded since I first learned about it in 2014 when I was looking for some answers. And he was part of it much even earlier than this, and he actually was the main speaker at their first Paleo FX conference in Austin in 2012. And he essentially told them that it would soon be proven, and now it has been, which we can chat about a little later on, that when we eat is actually more important than what we're eating. Again, that might sound counterintuitive, but the short explanation is there's a researcher today named Sachin Panda, who's a big circadian researcher. People can read his book. It's called The Circadian Code. And essentially, you actually mentioned that you read his book, right?
Yeah, I've talked about it a few times on this podcast, his book. It's an absolutely amazing book.
But is what I've said any exaggeration of what he's basically saying, or is it pretty close to what?
Absolutely not. I mean, he doesn't dive into the sunlight aspect as much, but he does to an extent, but not to as far as I know you're going to go into it. But it's very much on the same page.
Yeah, but so the key point is being that he's shown that in his studies that if they let animals eat good food, but they eat all day long, like they can eat even through the night, that it disrupts their sleep. And so therefore they don't get to regenerate and repair their mitochondria. So this is the link we're going to be getting to how it works with the sunlight. But basically they don't get to regenerate properly because they're eating late into the evening, which disrupts the sleep and repair process, which is the most important time for us as a living organism. Because we're born here, we die here, and every day we age a little bit more towards death. And then when we sleep, we can go back a little bit closer to birth. And so we go, and then we go back, and then we go, and then we go back. And this constitutes our life. But if we're constantly just sleeping like junk, we're going to go way forward and only go back a tiny bit each day on our road to death, as far as regenerating and improving our biologic function.
That is my favorite explanation of sleep. Thank you. That was incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, it's actually really about that. That's about what it is from a mind. And it's cool because I appreciate that I've learned the stuff that I've learned, because when you understand stuff from a scientific perspective at a foundational level, one is able to make analogies very easily, very simple that just resonate with people. And it isn't like I just thought of that as what sleep was way earlier. I had to learn the science and learn what it's really doing. Like in our mitochondria, we have this DNA. The mitochondria have their own DNA, which is what this guy, Dr. Doug Wallace, the mitochondrial researcher who's proven that the modern diseases are not genetic, they are mitochondrial. But it's in the mitochondrial genes that there's issues, but that's more of an environmental issue, it turns out, because the environment is what affects these. And as we age, we basically, the simple way to put it is, as we age, these mitochondrial genes, they start off with only a certain amount of mutations, but they accumulate more and more as we age. And we clean out mitochondria and cycle them, constantly make new ones, repair old ones, and so on. But as a cumulative population, this percentage of mutation in the mitochondrial genes, it starts low and it slowly increases over our life. And so the goal when we sleep, what melatonin does, this antioxidant repair molecule that people know about, which, by the way, this is the link we're getting to how the sun benefits us. And we'll talk about this. But basically, melatonin repairs this process, repairs these genes. And the reason we can't live past, for example, like 110, 120 years old is the maximum anyone's gotten to, is because these mitochondrial genes, no matter how well we live, they're going to keep accumulating mutations, which is called percent heteroplasmy. That's what, if someone looks up on YouTube, Dr. Doug Wallace, highly recommended. A couple of his talks, they're not too scientific. You'll be able to understand his points. And you'll get basically that when these become too high, then we die over time, like when it's reached its maximum. However, if the percentage of these mitochondrial gene mutations are too high in like the brain or the heart or any specific tissue relative to the rest of the body, then this is what we call diseases, basically, where the brain, like the rest of the body might be doing all right, but the brain has way too much of these, this heteroplasmy, this mutations in the mitochondrial DNA. So the brain can't generate energy properly anymore. And therefore, it can't carry out its normal functions that require energy, as everything in life does. Everything that occurs pretty much in the universe requires energy, because to occur means that something's happening, something's changing, and the movement of anything in the universe involves force. If everything just is exactly as it is in one moment, then there's not energy involved. But if anything's moving or anything is changing, even just the blood pumping through our vessels, that requires energy. So, Sachin Panda has shown that, and he's focused just on eating more than anything, but eating late alone and eating into the evening can disrupt this. He found that even the animals that they had eating good food shitty food, bad food within a closed window were actually healthier than the animals that were eating good food across a not closed eating window, which was a shocking finding that he presented in Venice Beach in December at a TED Talk. That's definitely going to be growing more and more as people realize the implications. But anyway, Dr. Cruz, this guy, who I'm giving credit to for the majority of what I've learned, I'm just here to kind of pass it along in ways that people can understand and connect more with. He announced this idea in 2012 and got a lot of flack from the paleo diet leaders. And actually now, 7 years later, I was just at Metabolic Health Summit in Los Angeles, and I asked a question to Rob Wolf on the stage at the Metabolic Health Summit, just basically because I was curious and I wanted the crowd to hear the answer, and I wanted, to put this into the discussion because no one was talking about light. Everyone was just talking about food, because it's a kind of a ketogenic diet conference, really, this Metabolic Health Summit. And I asked, what do you guys think about, it was him, Rob Wolf, Mark Sisson, Dominic D'Agostino, the big ketogenic researcher, and Aubrey Marcus, who didn't have anything to say at that moment. But I asked them, what do you guys think about the research showing that light, independent of diet and environment, can completely change our, for example, our carbohydrate metabolism, our blood glucose levels, independent of diet and exercise and environment. And likewise, it can change the function of several of our organ systems, just the ocular perception of light, light passing through the eye, in other words. And they basically, Rob Wolf actually said that if he was able to finish his presentation, he wasn't able to because of the time, but he was going to get to a slide where he spoke about or proposed that it is very possible now, based on the research, that circadian biology may be more important than food. And for anyone who's familiar with, the story or just understands what I just said, they were actually making fun of this guy, Dr. Cruz, literally joking about him on their threads. And I read this a few years ago when I first got into this and was trying to understand the difference in opinions. And now they're actually admitting, for example, Dave Asprey, and props to them for coming around. But it's good for people to understand kind of what's behind this and how this has gone in the health world. Dave Asprey, focused on bulletproof coffee and supplements for a long time, and still is largely. But a few years later, after Dr. Cruz brought out this focus on light and mitochondria, Dave Asprey publishes his book Game Changers, which talks huge amounts about the mitochondria, or Headstrong, also talking about the mitochondria, I should say, not Game Changers. This is Headstrong, and light, the importance of red light therapy and all this stuff. So to answer your question, Kyle, how does the light affect the mitochondria as opposed to the food affecting our circadian rhythms and everything like Panda is focused on, is that we have this circadian rhythm, which is our biologic clock. And this is what drives our sleep, which is when we repair the mitochondria. And it turns out that the circadian rhythm is driven by light. So if you put the equation together, sleep and regeneration and repair of the mitochondria is driven by light, particularly solar light. So basically in the morning, we're supposed to get, we're designed through nature, like every animal, the birds chirp as soon as first light comes. I mean, literally the moment that it starts rising and getting any light, they're very sensitive melanopsin receptors in their eyes, which we do too, but we absolutely destroy them with artificial light at night now and lack of sunlight during the day. But long story short, again, tell me if you think this is getting too sciencey, but I think it's good for the listener because I think we're putting it in words people can understand. Basically, melanopsin is the third photoreceptor in the eye after the rods and the cones, which many people are familiar with that we used to see. They communicate with visual centers in the back of our brain, I believe like lower backside. But melanopsin is part of these cells called retinal ganglion cells, which were recently discovered just about, 25 years ago, which is recent on the timescale of science. And they found that these cells particularly respond to blue wavelengths. And they don't communicate with our visual centers. They communicate directly to something called the hypothalamus, which contains specifically something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is the master timekeeper of our circadian rhythm. So simple explanation, we have non-visual, so receptors in our eye that drive the clock in our brain. And it is specifically tuned to just the blue wavelengths. And the reason why is because as the sun rises, the greatest change of any of the light frequencies is in the blue range, because the atmosphere, particularly, this is the reason the sky is blue, because the atmosphere scatters blue light when it passes through more than any other color except purple. But so basically, as the sun increases, the blue content becomes more and more and more because the sun has to pass through less atmosphere to be directly honest. That's why where Kyle and I are in Bali right now, because we're closer to the equator, when the sun goes up and up and up, it doesn't just kind of like, you know, in the northern hemispheres, like in Canada where Kyle's from and like Philly where I'm from, the sun will just cross the horizon like this, sort of like in your distance. But here it comes right up and over because we're on the equator. And that means that we have such a high UV index. It's so easy to get burnt because there's less and less atmosphere as the sun's higher up in the sky in the middle of the day. Mm-hmm. So again, same reason as the blue light increases in the morning, we actually have developed this ancient photoreceptor to sense it. So that starts our clock in the morning. And actually, it turns out the researchers have shown through the last, mostly in the 1900s, that melatonin, the creation of melatonin, which is the hormone of darkness, they say, it's actually stimulated by morning sunlight exposure. So actually this repair molecule that essentially keeps us young is stimulated with morning sunlight exposure as the sun rises from having no ultraviolet, and then ultraviolet becomes part of the sun, which we're going to talk about why ultraviolet does not cause skin cancer and is not bad for health. And it's actually critical for eukaryotic life to exist on Earth. Without ultraviolet light, complex animals would never have come into existence. So we create melatonin then, and then when the sun sets, the other half of the coin, light in the morning, and then we're meant to, and throughout the day, and then darkness at night. It's like the yin and the yang, light in the day, darkness at night. We need to have the darkness at night so that these melanopsin receptors, which help to turn our brain on in the morning and set our clock and drive our hormone functions, they notice the absence of blue light. And after about 3 to 4 hours, we begin to secrete melatonin. We get tired and sleepy, and we knock out and we regenerate. We sleep well. We repair our mitochondria. And this is how we maintain, not just maintain, but this is how we build optimal health. If we assimilate enough light during the day, we're actually able to improve our health while we sleep. We release the light that we've captured and use it to repair our tissues. And so this is basically how the basic way is by driving our clock. So that's one. It's sort of, I wouldn't say indirect. That's one direct way that the sun impacts mitochondrial health, is by driving our circadian rhythm and our sleep. The second is by basically driving, like I said, we absorb sunlight. So this is a really cool thing that people aren't aware of. Like, we are truly a photosynthetic being. People who say human photosynthesis or animal photosynthesis, jokingly as a joke, are unaware of the actual truth in their statements. The reason being, I can explain. If anyone looks up a picture of hemoglobin and chlorophyll, you can see chlorophyll is the molecule that plants contain, that assimilates sunlight and contains the energy and utilizes it to split the hydrogen and oxygen apart in a water molecule. So plants are cool because we put water together, hydrogen and oxygen together to make energy. Plants use sunlight to actually split it apart initially, and then they make sugars with it, and then they actually do the same thing. They have mitochondria also, so they have chloroplasts and mitochondria. So the chloroplasts split water apart, make sugars, and then the mitochondria take the sugars in and put the water molecule back together. So it's just they're using sunlight basically to do this process. We don't have the chloroplasts, so we can't make our own sugar. We're forced to eat a plant or an animal that ate a plant. But we have all kinds of other benefits of being an animal. Like, we can move across the plates, and we have therefore a more sort of, let's say, interesting experience than animals. And we fit a different niche. That's pretty much the key. But so we have, when ultraviolet light, or any frequency of sunlight, but particularly ultraviolet light, hits our skin, it liberates a molecule in our blood vessels called nitric oxide, which is basically a vasodilator, which means sunlight hits our skin, it causes this molecule, nitric oxide, to cause our blood vessels to expand. So this is, first of all, anyone who gets sunlight exposure, it immediately reduces our blood pressure just because it causes blood vessels to expand. So sunlight is basically natural blood pressure reduction, natural stress reduction that we're designed to be getting every day, but almost no one's ever getting it now. But this is how we're designed to function. So then blood flows more easily. But the key thing is that it allows blood to come up to the surface of our skin. And the question one would ask is why, when we go in the sun, would we have a mechanism to bring all the blood up to the surface? And the reason, turns out, is because on our red blood cells, we have this molecule, hemoglobin, which is just like chlorophyll in its molecular structure, if someone looks up the structure. And the reason why is because it is just like chlorophyll. It's designed to absorb sunlight. And it's been shown that hemoglobin absorbs light in the ultraviolet and in the red light spectrum. So we go in the sun, it causes nitric oxide to bring our blood up to the surface so that hemoglobin can absorb light. And hemoglobin, what else does it do? It brings oxygen to the mitochondria. So it also brings light to the mitochondria. And then the light, when it acts on the mitochondria, it's been shown that the proteins in the mitochondria are specifically designed to be able to absorb particularly red light frequencies, but also ultraviolet frequencies, which allows them to basically carry out their processes more efficiently. Like anytime you can get free energy, or let's say it's technically free. I mean, it was generated in the sun, because nothing in the universe is really free, but it's just, as far as we're concerned, it's free for our taking. Yeah. So anytime life can take that, it allows us to essentially catalyze and improve our process of energy generation, which is how well our mitochondria work, how we're alive, like you were saying in the beginning, Kyle, in the simple form. So we take sunlight through our blood wirelessly to our mitochondria, and it basically provides extra energy to allow the mitochondria to function optimally. People can look at Dr. Cruz's blogs that outline the deeper mechanisms of this very thoroughly, but this is essentially what happens. It's pretty amazing. So and there's another thing that we could talk about, which is how it charges up our water battery. But let's let you say one of your questions, because you want to go.
Well, I was just going to say that's
how it works.
That's fascinating. I mean, we hear about how sun helps with the circadian rhythm. I think that's somewhat common knowledge at this point. But knowing that or hearing that sunlight provides another form of energy is something completely new and absolutely fascinating, but makes complete sense. So I think that's really interesting. Now, what's funny about it is if you think about where things have gone the past, 20, 30 years, how many warnings we have about the sun and that it causes cancer, and we should be wearing sunscreen every day before you get outside, and we should be wearing sunglasses and protecting ourselves from the sun. You're covering your face as I say this for those who are not listening or who are not watching us here on YouTube. Talk a little bit about this. Is there a certain amount of sun that we want to get in the day? Can we get too much sun? Should we be wearing sunscreen and blocking? It sounds like no. Why don't you just dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. So a good resource just to start people off with is a guy named Dr. Alexander Wunsch, Wunsch. He is a German researcher on the health effects of light and one of the leading researchers in the let's say world on the health effects of light and its importance. And I'll actually be giving a talk at the same event as him in Germany this summer with Dr. Cruz also. It'll be pretty epic in Munich. It's called Flow Fest in Munich on July 6th for anyone who's interested. So
I got to do a visa run in July. So
yeah, definitely. Well, that would be, I'm telling you, Kyle, if you actually, as a friend, if you wanted to do something that would be like super badass, that would be badass. So, Dr. Wunsch, who's going to be speaking at the Munich event, he's basically made it very clear in his research that sunlight is not only critical for his health. That whole description of how the light comes up to the surface and our blood absorbs it is basically stuff I've learned from his work in a video called Why the Sun is Necessary for Optimal Health that he gave at University of California, San Diego. People might really enjoy that video. But the point is that it turns out that when we're exposed to sunlight, we want to get all this energy, right? Putting on sunscreen is like putting, Dr. Cruz says, a tarp on an orange tree. It's a really bad idea for an organism that it turns out is designed to be getting solar light. Now, the obviously great question one should ask is, well, why do people say that the sun causes skin cancer then? Like, why are dermatologists and doctors spreading this message? And of course, I believe this. Like, I was the one of all of my friends when we were growing up who would literally slather sunscreen on myself because I was very pale. The ultimate disconnected child. While my friends were listening to their intuition, like, nah, screw that, I don't need that stuff, I was like, no, guys, like, you're gonna get skin cancer, like, trust me. Like, I was screwing my friends over too with my stupid ideology. But basically, first of all, let's just start here. It has been shown that the first chemical sunscreens that people used, the active ingredient that would like attempt to absorb ultraviolet radiation and render it harmless by like lowering its energy or just absorbing it, they were only 20% efficient. In other words, out when the UV light would hit these molecules, the active ingredient in the sunscreen, 20% of the UV would be neutralized, and then, or 20% of, I should say, the molecule that was absorbing the UV light would be able to neutralize it. The other 80% was unable to handle the energy in the ultraviolet light and would become oxidized and turn into like a highly inflammatory oxidizing compound. And that's not good. In other words, with the first chemical sunscreens, they were actually way, way, way worse than not using anything at all. If you believe that the sun causes skin cancer, which isn't our premise, but they actually would cause more reactive, damaging molecules to be present, because these would absorb into the skin, these sunscreens, than if you just didn't do anything at all. So that one is one of the reasons why people today say that sunscreen actually causes skin cancer. Mm-hmm. And today, even the best sunscreens are only about 80% efficient, especially the ones that are absorbing into the skin. So like, this is why if I do surf or something and I haven't built up my solar callus enough on my face, which I haven't, I'll get into what I mean by solar callus. It is what it sounds like your calluses on your fingers from playing guitar, calluses on your feet from walking. Your solar callus is your sun callus. But basically, I would wear something that doesn't absorb into the skin. And the reason why is because then we don't have these molecules that are basically highly inflammatory and causing tremendous problems for us. If that makes sense, Kyle. Yep. But the ones that people are generally using, the ones that you spray, the ones that you rub on, in other words, the vast majority of sunscreens, the only one that is maybe slightly acceptable is the one that doesn't absorb again. But when you wear these, you look like a nut, it's like that stuff on the zinc that people put on their face. You want non-nano zinc oxide, because that means it doesn't absorb, non-nano. But the ones that do absorb, they are only 80% efficient. So the 20% of basically inefficiency means that these molecules are being damaged. The active ingredient is being damaged. And it's becoming like a highly inflammatory molecule in the body. So using sunscreen, the point is never, ever, ever a good idea, because even if you do believe that you're preventing, that the sun is bad, by wearing sunscreen, you're still increasing your risk of getting cancer more than if you didn't use the sunscreen at all. It would be substantially better to cover up with just like a shirt, stuff like that. And that's what I recommend, actually. If you are super pale and you're trying to build up your solar callus, after just a few minutes of sun exposure, that's when you need to cut it off, and you need to basically put on a shirt, put on a hat, and then maybe go into the shade as well.
So just to clarify, you still don't want to get burnt from the sun. Sun is great, but to an extent, you don't want to burn your skin to the point that it's getting red and peeling. This is where the issue can come along as well.
And not because but not because burning causes skin cancer. That's another thing where I won't concede. People will say, so sun's good, but if you get burned, then you're going to get skin cancer. The research does not indicate that the sun causes skin cancer in any fashion. So we didn't get into this, but we were just talking about sunscreen and various options. But so the original research that was showing that sunlight causes, I shouldn't say, there's no research showing that sunlight causes skin cancer. None. Zilch. Nada. It is the claim is that UV light causes skin cancer. So they were using artificial ultraviolet bulbs. Remember, keyword artificial, not sun. Electric-based ultraviolet lamps in labs on laboratory animals that were subject to an indoor lifestyle, probably never ever got any sunlight exposure, maybe a little bit, but probably not much. Based on what I've learned, this is enough to cause skin cancer and all kinds of other cancers too. Being indoors, never getting sunlight. Because it turns out that one of the things that this UV light coming through our skin, being ferried to our mitochondria actually does is it helps to tightly regulate control of apoptosis, which is the process by which our cells kill themselves when they don't work well, is apoptosis. So like if you have a bad cell, if it kill itself before it goes haywire or has any problems, then because obviously the cell's going to try to repair themselves first through something called autophagy. But if they can't repair themselves, or if it's too far gone to salvage and it's better to just break the cell apart and use the remaining molecules for a new cell or new structures, then it'll kill itself through apoptosis. So, and it turns out, again, this process is tuned by the mitochondria, which are tuned by sunlight. So if we don't get sunlight, we're not able to have our mitochondria functioning optimally and taking care of apoptosis optimally. This is how cancer occurs. So in other words, what I'm saying is that the evidence shows that the only way to get cancer is if your mitochondria don't work well, if apoptosis doesn't work well. Because if cells can select themselves out before they go rogue, then cancer is not possible. Cancer can only happen when apoptosis is completely broken, which may seem like overly simple, but if you really think about it, that is actually the fact of the matter. So, and that when I learned that a couple years ago, I was like, whoa, that is powerful and super simple. So again, we want to have the mitochondria working well so the apoptosis works well. And so point is these laboratory animals were being subjected to all the conditions to create cancer, an indoor lifestyle, no full spectrum sunlight, and then they're being irradiated with artificial, probably normal fluorescent bulbs that they spent most of their time under, and then they were maybe subjected to just pure ultraviolet light. And again, based on what I've learned in the past few years, which Dr. Wunsch, for example, would support based on his research, when you take any piece of the spectrum and you isolate it down and you don't have like the full spectrum, you're creating a higher risk for having these issues, basically. So people ask me a lot about tanning beds. I tell people that I think, again, based on what I've learned, tanning beds are fine if you're doing them for maybe in the winter 3 times a week, maybe minute sessions, something like this. Getting that UVA light can actually have a tremendous benefit. But you want to be getting full spectrum sunlight several hours of the day as well. And again, I actually would have to go back and brush up on the exact mechanisms, the methods of the studies that were done on these like primates as well as on rodents, but they were not very well conducted, and they definitely did not. They were using artificial lights, so they're not enough to go out and claim that the sun causes skin cancer. Now, if we wanted to be smart and look at both sides of the equation, it would be good to also look at, for example, every ancient culture that ever existed, essentially, or the vast majority of them, who made the sun their chief god. You know, and it begs the question, like, why did all these cultures, which we know they had a lot of wise knowledge, a lot of them were very healthy. Yes, they had their flawed beliefs as well. But they knew that the sun was tremendously beneficial. Like Egyptians, there's an account by the Greek historian Herodotus, when he went to a battle called Pelusium between the Persians, I believe, and the Egyptians. He was feeling the skulls, and he found that the Persians, with just a small tap of a pebble, people can read his account online, their skulls would crack. But the Egyptians, it took tremendous strength and effort to attempt to crack one of the Egyptian skulls. And he proposed the reason that made the most sense is because the Egyptians would shave their heads so that they had sun directly on their skulls, and that this would strengthen their skulls. And the Persians would wear these felt caps to keep their faces and their heads always protected from the sun. And based on the research, this makes tremendous sense because the sun does several things, like improves our vitamin D levels, which is critical to strong bone. The other mechanism that is less known is that the sun strengthens the charge in our body, our redox potential, which is a simple term for how well our mitochondria work. And thereby this can, I think, based on what I've been reading in the last few years, this could contribute to what was discovered by a guy named Dr. Robert O. Becker, who wrote a book called The Body Electric. He basically found that our bones are innately electric and they use electricity to heal and grow as semiconduction. And so I believe that this could be that getting the sun exposure contributes to this mechanism through mechanisms I don't fully understand. Dr. Cruz has written bits about them, but so sun can just also strengthen our bones by adding energy that we're able to utilize in this process.
So again, is this why you shaved your head before you came out here to Bali?
Yeah, actually I shaved it right when I got here, and that was kind of part of my motivation. Like I wanted to see how I would feel to get sun directly on my skull. But I would have, to really get it direct, I would have had to keep shaving it, just as often you have to shave your face. I would have had to keep shaving my head each couple of days because the hair grew back fast. I mean, it's been 1 month. I've already got like a pretty thick coat, but I decided that I want to let it grow back in and get the blonde, and there's enough space still to let it pass through. But I felt pretty good, but that is kind of part of the motivation. Yes, to get
that's so funny. So, I mean, we hear about the skin and we want to protect the skin. The other area, and this was actually something very interesting that you talked about when you went on my Instagram, because you were making fun of the one of the people that we were with at the bar, and sun is also.
I really do.
You what? What's that?
I think she listens to this.
So the sun is also, it's not just being pulled in through the skin, it's also being pulled in through the eyes. And this is a very important aspect to understand, especially if you wear sunglasses, you wear contacts, which was an eye-opener for me, no pun intended, I didn't mean to do that. You wear glasses. Can you talk about that just a little bit, because that was super interesting.
It's funny how the phrase eye opener, it's like it how can I say it innately implies exactly everything you're talking about. So when it's like what I said earlier, it's like you have to understand the really foundational things to understand these simple analogies. Like having eye opener, let's just dig into it. Eye opener implies that the premise is that when your eyes are closed, you're missing something, and when your eyes are open, all of a sudden you get this new flash of information. So yes, it is in a way a pun, because I don't think that the original understanding of that pun or analogy, whatever it's called, was like the benefits of light passing through your eye. But nonetheless, it turns out that when our eyes are closed, or when we have cataracts or we're blind, cataracts also make people blind. These block the light from fully penetrating through the eyes, which block a tremendous amount of functions from occurring in the brain. Now, an interesting way to put it in the real world context, if you think about like when you see light passing through your eye, or when you have light passing through your eye and you have images, like I have some, like here, this is kind of cool. I can just show, I have like a nice little view out to just like, there's a tiny little like river, but the rivers here are dirty. They're full of like plastics and stuff, but there's, I don't know if you saw, there's like a little palm tree. Yeah. So just having light passing through your eye, you see something good or like that makes you happy, you get like a dopamine hit. You see something that's bad, you get like you get worried. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, on a conscious, or even to some extent to it on a subconscious level, on our day-to-day basis, if you really, really want to reduce it down, if you looked at yourself or a human like as if we were a fly, right? Like you're looking from the third, you just see human and you see something good and you go, and then you see something bad and you go, oh. We don't look at a fly and imagine that the fly has vision like we do, right? We imagine that maybe, at least I imagine that its eyes maybe are just sensors of energy, which they are. That's what ours are. I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that just by seeing different things on a day-to-day basis, like seeing something that makes you happy, that causes dopamine spike. Seeing something that makes you like worried or stressed or anxious based on your programming in your brain to know what's a threat, what's positive. This alone alters our hormones in ways that we can immediately be familiar with, because when you're happy, that's a physiochemical thing going on in the brain. And same thing as when you're scared, that's another cortisol change. So that's just an example to put out there for people to realize that the idea that light coming through the eye can alter your hormones is something that you should not be foreign to, because everything you ever think, do, or that is related to your active seeing is driven by the light that's passing through and your interpretation of the light on conscious and subconscious levels. So beyond this day-to-day, yeah, I know, but do you get what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
We look at our day-to-day life as if it's just this good thing happens and it makes me happy, and this, or I see this negative thing and it makes me scared or sad. But all that is, in a way, I mean, I don't mean to reduce life down to just a bunch of chemical equations, because I don't have that viewpoint. It's just a bunch of stuff. To some extent, yes, there's more to it. I do believe in the talk of like a soul, a spirit, sort of a deeper energetic being that exists within us, which again, that's not unscientific at all. And we could talk about that a little bit later on or in a future episode. But the point is that idea shouldn't be foreign to people, right? So it is, these things are just light coming in the eye, stimulating certain, beliefs, memories, and certain things. And those convert into chemical things via our subconscious and conscious perception and programming, right? So then there's other effects that light have on our body that don't go through our conscious or unconscious programming. They go directly to the source. Like when you have light shining on your eye in the morning, or just an artificial light, either one, it basically it doesn't pass through your memories, your conscious this or that. At least I don't think it does. It could. Anything could be proven. But these signals that we're talking about just go directly to the source. They affect your hormones directly. So like when the sun rises and you get that blue light, immediately we're getting like a sort of a cortisol spike that's waking us up, and it gradually goes down throughout the day. And then when we have the absence of light, then we have that melatonin increase a couple hours, like 3 to 4 hours afterwards. So that is basically how light coming through our eye affects these things. So when you put on sunglasses or contact lenses, you can still see the visual color spectrum that drives your emotional and just thinking processes. Like you put on sunglasses, like your friend had on, she can still operate in the normal world as far as she's consciously aware. She sees a friend and she says, hey, because she knows the friend from her memory and everything, right? And it makes her happy. But the thing that you're not aware of when you put on sunglasses, the premise is that the sun's bad and UV light causes I'm pretty sure the reason they say sunglasses are bad is because it causes melanoma in your eye. So ocular melanoma, UV light, cataracts, and there's a third one, macular degeneration. I'm pretty sure those are the three things they say that the sun will cause, UV light particularly will cause if you get UV on your eye. So you got to have UVA, UVB protection on your glasses, right? Better to buy sunglasses that don't have UVA, UVB protection. I promise you that. But so yeah, the thing that someone's not aware of when they slap those on their eyes is that they block UV. They block UV light, either most of it or all of it. And not only that, they distort the rest of the spectrum in certain ways, which affects the hormonal signals and everything. But so the key thing to note is that when UV light is blocked from our eye, we're no longer capturing this very, very powerful light source. So just like getting it through our skin is great, we're primarily designed to get it through our eye. And one way that, it's essentially the same. The light passes through our eye. A lot of blood is in the vessels just in the back of our eye. And so these vessels, just like we absorb the light through the skin, they absorb the light and allow it to do all kinds of cool things through our body. But also this, like light passing through the skin, it has certain hormonal effects, like allowing us to synthesize vitamin D. That's one of the biggest that goes on. However, the ones going through the eye are the ones that control the vast majority of other hormone processes. And this is why we don't want to distort the spectrum in any way. We don't want to wear sunglasses, contacts, or even glasses. Like if you need glasses to see, shortly, within a few, probably I'd say within a year, Raw Optics will have lenses available that actually transmit the full spectrum. Now, they're probably going to be very expensive, but this will be a really good investment if someone has glasses, because they'll allow you to start to improve your vision rather than letting it get worse and worse and worse. But these lenses that transmit the full spectrum hardly have ever existed. Quartz lenses, which is what Julius Caesar wore apparently as his sunglasses, because he probably didn't have vision problems, because that's a very modern phenomenon, and I can explain more on that. But those transmit the full spectrum. Quartz does, but it's very expensive. That's why it wouldn't be feasible for most people to have all their windows in their house being made of quartz. But that would be optimal. Okay. We didn't touch on is the reason I opened the door in the beginning here is because even just having the glass blocking the light, glass typically reduces the infrared and red portion of the spectrum, which means there's relatively more blue light, which also creates basically the problems we've discussed of having excessive blue light. Well, we haven't got too deep into that, but it's ultimately just mitochondrial issues. But to get into sunglasses, so I don't want to go too far around the point. Basically, when you wear sunglasses, you're blocking UV light. The research shows that UV light's actually critical for driving lots of key hormones like testosterone production, the synthesis or the conversion, I should say, of tryptophan into serotonin, and which subsequently is converted into melatonin. And this is some of the work of Dr. Wunsch putting these pieces together. Also, the work of a guy named Fritz Hallwich, whose book anyone who has serious questions about this should read. It's quite expensive. It's like $150. It's like a textbook, a school textbook practically. It's not that thick. It's called The Influence of Ocular Light Perception on Metabolism in Man and an Animal. And by metabolism, they mean all hormonal functions, the liver, the kidney, the sex hormones, all this stuff. Other things that the sun converts. So we make melatonin, serotonin. We also make dopamine. So this is a huge one for people to get. Tyrosine is converted into dopamine, largely with the power of ultraviolet spectrum that we absorb through our eye. And then these reactions occur back in the brain. So when we block sunlight with sunglasses, or we just don't go outside, we don't make enough dopamine, which is why Dr. Cruz jokes, and I joke as a result. I think it's hilarious, but also true, that we have like a low dopamine society today. And dopamine doesn't just mean it's not just your happiness mood molecule. It is one, but this is one of the reasons why a lot of people, you could say, are assholes. I mean, I actually think most people who are out there today are pretty nice. But when someone is just you meet people on the street or in the subway or wherever who are just not having any of it. You could try to be friendly and they're just not into it. And these are what you would call low dopamine people. They never see the sun. And so they have such a depressed state they live in. But again, that's because the sunlight, and this is not any strange fact to anyone who's ever lived through a winter and had sun in the spring. Yeah. Sun raises your dopamine level. It makes you feel good. The other cool function of dopamine is that it is a trend recognition molecule. So it basically allows us to improve our trend recognition, which basically means the ability to think. In other words, thinking, and not just the ability to think, but yeah, in a way, the ability to think is directly related to our ability to recognize trends in the outer world and put two and two together. Okay, I want to have this goal. Well, in order to have this goal, I need to do this and this and this and this. That takes dopamine. It takes dopamine to have motivation. That's one of the biggest things of dopamine, because again, it's trend recognition. You want to be fit or healthy. Well, it takes dopamine to realize that you need to maybe sacrifice your current, watching Game of Thrones 8 hours a day inside your bedroom to maybe get fit. But again, it's going to be an upfront dopamine drop because you're sacrificing that blue light computer screen that's boosting your dopamine level temporarily, but costing you tremendously in the long run, to actually get to a better spot. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's if you're wearing sunglasses, you're harming your dopamine level tremendously. Or if you're never seeing morning sunlight, or sunrise or anything like that. So that's another issue. An even bigger issue is that sunlight exposure, again, through our eyes and skin, it stimulates the synthesis of a molecule called beta endorphin, which is an internal opioid. So this is the reason in addition to low dopamine, low serotonin, all driven by a lack of sunlight, that people today we have such a huge epidemic in the United States, an opiate crisis, basically a massive opiate crisis where thousands, tens of thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of young people are losing their lives to serious opiate overdose. And the reason why, I mean, again, people say, oh, it's just the drugs, and it's just the drugs. And these people, once they try the drug, they're hooked forever because it's so addictive. But you have to ask the question, like, why do these people start smoking cigarettes? And they need the cigarettes to feel good. And then they smoke pot, and they need the pot to feel good. And then they drink a ton, and they need the drink to feel good. And then they're doing lean or Xanax or Coke or like these things that a lot of my friends use. Well, maybe old friends, some people I'd still consider friends, but they're in college and they're just going through all these motions. And then they go into Coke, and then they're doing like fucking heroin next thing you know. Meth, whatever it is. Like, I mean, I don't know I don't think I know personally many people who have gone down that route, because I come from maybe more wealthy, privileged background where people were kind of really educated so hard that they should avoid this. But I don't think it will be long till a lot of the people I know who are already doing Coke and this and that, you know, all the drugs you could think of, party drugs, Xanax and whatnot, Adderall, are going to just be eventually migrating, because they're not going to be able to get their fix if they don't learn about the light diet, right? Because they're just going to feel so depressed and so shitty. They're just going to need the next stimulant to try to draw every single last ounce of energy out of their body's bank account, until they're just going to be in such debt that they're just going to collapse and die. But this is all driven by sunlight deficiency. Like, once I started getting more and more sun, I didn't need to like smoke pot, because I smoked pot all the time when I was growing up, like when I was 13, 14 years old, just going into high school, and it made me feel so great. But after I started getting sun and feeling good naturally, smoking pot actually made me super anxious, and I didn't need it. I didn't even want it anymore. So this is maybe one of the most important things. And we just got onto this because of sunglasses. Like, just blocking the light that drives these biologic processes is really a way, way bigger issue than anyone
could. I was just going to say, it's crazy how far this can escalate when you actually dive into the changes that sunlight can make for you. Like, to go on.
I'll throw you a trip, dude. I can throw you a real trip if you want. Like, think about this. Where is tobacco grown?
In the sun outside.
Yeah, but like, can you grow tobacco? Well, you know, can you grow tobacco very easily in Canada?
I don't know if it's grown easy. We have tobacco. I've seen that's grown there, I'm pretty sure. But I mean, I'm not big in the farming industry.
The point I'm trying to make is that it's generally in places with strong sun. It grows best.
Okay.
Then I'll just put a few things together. The better analogy is, I guess Coke would probably be the best one. Where do they grow Coke typically?
Yeah, the Caribbean, South or Central America.
Especially they grow it in South America, I think Uruguay, so they're just near the equator. They're in extremely strong sun in mountains that are thousands of feet up. So these plants get insane amounts of light. So I guess the point that I'm getting at, I don't know how backed by science. I'm kind of putting myself out on a limb, by the way. Yeah. This is not fully my research, but my theory is that these drugs that people take are like temporary sort of sunlight replacements. Like, and that's why Coke is like someone who's in Canada or in the States, totally deficient in sunlight. They get a little Coke, this extremely refined product of a molecule that's grown basically as close to the sun as you can get in South America. They take a little bit of that and they go, like, I feel amazing. And then it goes away, because they don't have the actual physiologic power, like the power behind that drive that energy. They're just draining their battery out. Same thing like with the one drug, I think it's MDMA, that like it loads off all your serotonin in like one day, one session. It's like they say robbing Peter to pay Paul, I guess. Like, it's, not optimal.
It's interesting. I know there's no research on it. Well, not no, but it's limited. If anything, I don't think there would be a whole lot on that, because that would be tough to prove. But it's minds like that, like you, that get that research to happen, that get these ideas out there, so that we end up figuring these things out. So it is a little bit out there, but that's really cool, and I really like the idea of it. Super, super interesting.
Funny, I met another guy recently who had the same sort of vibe to him.
Really? So, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Let's scale it back.
Continue.
let's let's bring it back a little bit here. So we talked about sunglasses, and it's funny because we're told to wear sunglasses during the day to block the sun. You're saying the complete opposite. And now where I want to take this is, as the sun goes down, the big issue that is becoming quite common now is blue light. And we're learning all about the problems of blue light when the sun goes down. And so your idea, and a company that you've actually started, is glasses at night instead of during the day to actually block this blue light. Why don't you talk about the effects of blue light? What's this doing to our circadian rhythm? What's this doing to us? Dive into this area, and let's talk about how we can sort of manage it or fix it.
Yeah, I'm going to try to keep this explanation not as thorough, but not as tangent, as many tangents involved for the sake of brevity. Basically, as blue light is the frequency that these receptors in our eye look for always present in the sun, but they look for this to turn the brain on in the morning. If we have blue light sources, and what we mean by blue light is blue light frequencies, which are a component of the spectrum. When we have electric lighting, which is like a relatively new innovation since 1879, it actually has blue light frequencies at night, which is something that was really never possible in nature, except for from the moon and from the stars, which is like such a tiny amount. It's not enough to stimulate the melanopsin receptors in our eye, and the moon is hardly enough either. Or lightning, which is so quick, and it's not bright enough to really be too relevant. And it's so rare. Like we're talking like a millisecond, like a couple times, very rarely in the month, So that's why when we have electric lighting, which all of a sudden makes a lot of artificial light at night possible, we begin to actually have some serious issues. So the interesting thing actually that I thought was pretty cool when I learned it is, if you think about, where does the word lunatic come from? It's like lunar, like the moon. Yeah. So actually what this, apparently this is because when the moon would come out, the crazy people would come out. And when the full moon would come out. And this is arguably, potentially, because the moon, when it was full, was the only source of blue light at night, artificial light at night, or not artificial, but blue light frequencies at night that could ever have happened when we were growing up. And since our systems were much more sensitive to these, these things, having that light at night could potentially trigger let's say the crazy people to come out and have their psychotic episodes or whatever. Yeah. Again, it may be far out on the limb, but that's like something Dr. Cruz has thrown out as another far out there suggestion. So now we have, again, imagine back to like Shakespearean times, like Romeo, Juliet. Like we were almost like birds in the sense that we could not disrupt this internal circadian rhythm no matter what we did. Well, we could stay up late. We could destroy our sleep by pulling an all-nighter, but we couldn't create artificial light at night to really permanently throw it off. Because, okay, maybe you stay up late all night long for a night or several nights, and you're disrupting your circadian rhythm as a result of that. But no matter what, the light is always going to be pretty constant. Like there's going to be sunlight during the day and no artificial light at night. The only light at night would be torches, candles, gas-powered lamps, things using a wick, all of which are burning light, which is, using fire, I should say. And this has significantly less, it actually has almost no blue light, unless it's done by propane. If you burn propane, there's a little bit more blue light present because of the energy that's released. But burning wick, most oils that are used in the past, torches, fires, don't have the blue light. So when we have now modern lights, they have some blue, which disrupts our system. Now, however, the first light bulbs that were used even up till like the 1970s hardly had this effect. The incandescent bulbs, which are, you could consider them burning light still in a way, because they're burning a filament, sort of. And the filament would eventually burn out. Those had less blue light and they released a lot more heat. And people considered this an issue recently because they're much less energy efficient. And so people decided to use light that has a lot more blue, which requires it is just less energy efficient. It has the effect, and the reason why modern LEDs and CFL, compact fluorescent bulbs, and screen devices are now based on blue light is because the people who made these knew, not that this, I don't think they knew that this would harm people's health, because when melanopsin was discovered, this photoreceptor that drives this circadian clock, was after the fluorescents and all these bulbs started to become used. But what they did know is that the blue frequencies would allow people to be more energetic and stay awake and be, let's say, more productive, because they're turning your stress hormones on more, which would make you a bit more focused and productive. However, this is, again, when we create acute stress on a chronic basis in our biology, this may make us more productive, extend our working hours on the front end, but it's actually just draining health off the end of our life. And this isn't even something that we need to get too into, but anyone today knows that increased stress, whether it's emotional stress or physiologic stress like this, leads to increased rates of diseases and accelerated aging and all kinds of problems like these. So this wasn't known probably when they first started using these bulbs and switching to the more energy efficient ones, or the fluorescent tubes in offices that have much more blue light that make people more focused. But this is the result. It not only during the day does it cause an alteration in our hormone levels, creating a chronic stress response, and we no longer get that shifting of the light that we're supposed to throughout the day as the sun goes up and then down. But also so in the day it's a problem, but at night it's an even bigger problem, because we're supposed to have darkness after the sun goes down so that we can be secreting melatonin a couple hours later. Now that we have these lights around, especially the ones that are based in blue, which is pretty much, if you go out tonight, if anyone goes out, you can immediately tell whether the street lights on your street have been upgraded to bright white LEDs, or if they're still the old warm orange lights that they are here in Bali. Most modern cities in Europe and the States have shifted them to be cool white LEDs, which are terrible. And there's even loads of studies and articles that come out that show that these disrupt people's sleep. They leak through your blinds and everything. And these have way more blue light than those old orange ones did, which were much calmer, warmer, and more relaxed, which is the same kind of lighting that good restaurants use typically, because they know that it is more relaxing and easier for you to calm down. So our glasses, Raw Optics blue blocking glasses, this was one of the things I used in my journey of health to when I first learned about the light diet protocols, after having graduated from paleo diet and all this food focused stuff that I was into, onto Dr. Cruz's work and the things he was laying out. One of the key things is using blue blocking glasses to improve the sleep and melatonin and the circadian rhythm. So I was wearing these glasses. Now the only ones that were really available were like these ugly safety goggle styles, but they block the blue frequencies, allowing the brain to perceive that it's night even when there's still artificial light around. And as a result, one is able to have that increased melatonin secretion and sleep better as a result. So it's pretty cool. So that, I think,
just to add into that, it does, yeah. And so I've never used blue light blocking glasses before. I've talked about them and promoted them in other podcasts, not specific brands or anything, but I've just said that they are useful. But I've never actually had a chance to use it frequently. And when I met Matt, he let me borrow a pair of his Raw Optics, and I've been wearing them every night. And I'll tell you right now, they are absolutely amazing if you're working at night or just kind of cruising around, because there's light everywhere. You don't realize it until you talk to Matt. But there's blue light all over the place at night. And, my sleep has been so much better, which I can prove through my Oura Ring that I'm tracking with, since I've been wearing these glasses. And even I put them beside my bed. If I got to wake up to go to the bathroom, I put those glasses on, or I try to go to the bathroom just in the dark, but sometimes it doesn't. Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't go too well. So I throw on the glasses and I can fall right back to sleep. Yeah. So I mean, they're awesome. I absolutely love it. And I'll throw some links in the show notes to the listeners if you want to look at the pairs that Raw Optics sells. I may even push Matt to get a discount code for you guys.
We'll get a discount code. It'll probably just be HealthSimple.
HealthSimple, perfect. So just throw in HealthSimple and you'll get, I don't know what, but we'll figure it out and I'll let you guys know. Probably in this episode anyway. Perfect. So yeah, did you have more? I know I interrupted you there, but I wanted to just say how sweet your glasses were.
That is actually, no, that's everything. I think I've gotten the full kind of depth across of basically what blue light is, how Absolutely. It turns our brain on in the morning, how it drives the circadian system. Circadian, by the way, means circa, comes from Latin approximately. Dies means day in Latin, like dia in Spanish. Mm-hmm. So circadian means approximately 1 day, which is why they call it they call it circadian rhythm, because our internal rhythm is approximately 24 hours, and that is pretty clearly because the length of the day is 24 hours. So we built an internal rhythm that matches the external rhythm. So here people can see, I'm just doing a little demo with my little spectrometer of the light of my computer screen versus the light of the sun. So this is a computer screen, LED emission. So it's these like unbalanced spikes and a pretty large spike in the blue range. Look at that, right? Now if I just aim up and I just aim out at what's coming in through my door, that's what you get. You see the difference there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty sweet difference. So again, this is what's coming in through the door, pretty balanced spectrum. Yeah. And then this is what coming straight from the computer screen. It's so that it just, these changes in the spectrum alter our hormones and the way we're designed to be functioning. So again, it's okay to be on your computer and not even wear glasses, because people are going to wonder, why isn't he wearing his glasses? He's on his computer. Because I have the UV coming through the door. I don't want to block that out, because the glasses block that, just like all glasses do today, except the ones we might be coming out with in a couple of months. So this is the spectrometer.
Awesome. Here's where I want to take this. So first of all, this was an absolute shit ton of information, which was super awesome. So thank you. What I always like to have some practical tips for the listeners when we touch on a subject, especially a new subject like this. So first of all, we're going to get you back on here for part 2, because I think there's still a lot we haven't touched on, like EMF and just other areas of this. So I want to do that. I also feel like from this conversation, there's going to be a lot of questions. And if you're one of those people that has questions, message me on Instagram or shoot me an email from my website, whatever, or hit up Matt at The Light Diet on Instagram and ask, because then we can do another episode and we'll dive into some of these questions that people have. Yeah. But before we finish out,
if you want your questions to be asked on the next interview, I would send them to Kyle, because then he'll be able to like make a list. But if you just want to ask me, go for it. I'll respond to you as soon as I can.
But before we end it, what I want to do, and by the way, I don't know how Joe Rogan does 3-hour-long podcasts. I think we're at like maybe an hour and 20 minutes, if that. And like just sitting for this long kills me.
You're in person. I think it's because you're in person. You just, I think it's because you're in person.
So anyway, let's walk through what an optimal day would be. Think about Matt, what I want you to do is think about the average person, what we typically do. You know, we wake up later after the sun's up from an alarm. We wear sunglasses. We do this. So what's the optimal day, and what are some easy changes that people can make? Because not everyone is going to be able to do the most optimal day ever. So what are some easy, best bang for your buck type changes that someone can make to benefit from the light diet?
Yeah, normally I would go through, a lot of the time I'll go through all of the steps in podcasts, but people can go to mattmaruca.com/podcasts to listen for more. I have a list of podcasts I've been on. I like your idea of just giving the key things that people can do. So the best things you can do, the number one is every morning, just go outside and be like the Sphinx of Giza, which is facing east towards the sun. So just look east, and if you can, optimally set your alarm to get up for sunrise every single day and start waking up at sunrise and watching it as it rises over the horizon. Not only is it a beautiful, great time to meditate, really awesome experience overall, but also it programs your circadian rhythm. As the sun inclines, I would look at it for about 15 minutes directly, maybe 30 if you're at a higher latitude, like in the States or Canada in the winter, or Europe, because there's no UV for a certain period of time when it's coming through the atmosphere. So just get the morning sun. Once it gets a little stronger, look off to the side. If it's really too overwhelming, even when it rises, just look off to the side, let it hit your eye, although you should be able to look at it directly, and you can build up your eye muscle. And just spend minimal clothing and being barefoot, grounded on the earth there's tons of benefits of that Kyle, you'll probably, talk about, or someone else you can interview will talk about all that. But that connects the system, essentially, connecting us to the ground and the earth so we can assimilate light better. But that's it. Just get up and get the sun in the morning and start spending more time in the sun. In my book that I'm working on, The Light Diet, I should say, I'll have a lot of explanations of how people can build up a healthy solar callus if you're really white, really pale. There's lots of things that go into this, like drinking good quality water that's free of fluoride and chloride, like good quality spring water too. That's what makes up our body. That's where we store our light, essentially. And we want that water to be good. We don't want it to be full of like chemicals or taking in a bunch of chemicals that are toxic from municipal water sources in major American cities or cities like that. So there's that. There's other things you want to consider is eating a lot of seafood, because that is the omega-3, particularly called DHA. I'm just going to say that it isn't properly utilized and assimilated when it comes from a processed form. So only eat the whole seafood form when you consume it. And I even have a guy who was previously running a company that sells omega-3 supplements, specifically told me that after he read about and learned about more of the research and what's actually happening and the quality of the molecules that are coming from the factories in China, he never recommends anyone ever take the products that he was selling before, this omega-3 supplements. So never, ever, ever touch any of those. Not only are they not able to be utilized properly, they're actually harmful because you're putting really oxidized toxic chemicals into your body when you take those. No matter which brand, no matter how clean they advertise it is, because he was saying their company's the cleanest, but even he told me that he's vegan, so he won't eat seafood. He doesn't, he has different viewpoints, but he said if I were to ever do it, it would be way better to have seafood than this artificial stuff that people are selling, passing off as healthy and safe, which it isn't. So whole seafood, don't worry about mercury. It's not an issue if your redox mitochondrial function is good. And some people would violently disagree with that if they're from the functional medicine health world, where they're only focused on the gas and stuff. They don't understand the engine and how it is relevant and how it works and how the body's designed to handle small amounts of these things. And it's not like you're eating mercury. It's like tiny amounts that the body can get rid of. But again, if you're from like the UK, or I have a friend from the UK that's like mercury toxicity or whatever, then you're going to be afraid of this. What's that?
Is that Ryan Carter?
No, actually, the mutual friend actually is the mutual friend. He thinks tuna is like the worst thing ever. You should never eat tuna. He told me he thinks tuna is worse than like ice cream and all this other not just ice cream, but like refined vegetable oil. He made it sound like it's the devil, but I just strongly disagree. But he's from a country where he never gets any sun, so his body can't properly get rid of this stuff. So of course he's going to think that any of these toxins are bad if he can't get rid of them properly. So eating a ton of seafood is a huge win that you want to consider. Like I would say, if you can eat it every single meal, great. If you can eat it once a day, great. If you can eat it 3 to 5 times a week, great. Any less than that, not optimal. I would eat a lot of it. And we're here, Kyle and I, go out for some Echo Beach barbecue and just eat all the seafood we can. It'll be pretty awesome. It's great. So that's huge. And then when I say seafood, oysters are the best. The shellfish. As far as their nutrient composition, it's amazing if you can eat some oysters, but mussels, clams are awesome too. Shrimp is great too. Lobster and crabs is great too. Fish, which is like the most, common and thing people are most familiar with. Salmon is awesome because of how much omega-3 it has. It's super fatty. You want fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, trout. Sardines are awesome. Anchovies too. Sardines I prefer. I'm not a fan of anchovies personally. Things like cod are lower in DHA. They're more proteinous and less fatty, but still cod still has more DHA than like grass-fed meat. And this is actually interesting. Dr. Cruz's belief on why grass-fed meat is so beneficial and people do better on it from the paleo perspective. He believes it's actually because the grass-fed meat has more DHA in it because the cows convert the DHA from the grass when they eat it. So he believes that's why it's beneficial and not all the other stuff they talk about. I mean, yes, it's more ethical when you have grass-fed meat. The fat composition is better. There is more DHA. He believes that's the key factor. But if you eat seafood, you're getting 50 times or 100 times as much in a single serving, literally. It's just not a comparison. So that's another consideration. But again, getting the morning sun, if you're trying to build your solar callus, You want to be getting the sun in the morning, maybe getting little bits of exposure throughout the day. If you live in like Canada or Europe or the States, if you just start building up starting in like February and March, you should be able to assimilate. You know, you do 5-10 minutes a day, maybe 20 minutes just before you get burnt. Again, I'm going to tell you, if you get a little bit burnt, it's not the end of the world. Just don't do it repeatedly. Not because you're going to get skin cancer, but because it hurts. Again, I'm not a medical doctor. None of this is medical advice. Consult with your physician before.
Throws that in at the very end of the podcast.
Yeah. You just put that disclaimer in the show notes. Not Kyle or not medical doctors, and none of this is medical advice. However, it's just research that I've come across and worked for me. So yeah, morning sun, tons of it, lots of it. It's not going to burn you because the sun isn't high enough to have tons of UV until like maybe 9 a.m. or, if you're in Bali, it's by 8:30, 9, it's already super strong enough to burn someone with super white skin. But in Europe or North America or like South Africa or Australia, in the south of Australia, it's not going to be nearly as strong in the winter, and coming into the spring and summer, it will be strong enough to burn you. So that's when you want to exercise caution and judgment. And then the other side of the coin, morning sunlight and sunlight throughout the day. If you work indoors, take sun breaks. That's a great move. And then getting basically darkness at night. So the simplest hack is to get yourself a pair of good-looking raw optics blue blocking glasses, and you basically will wear these the moment the sun sets so that you have that proper circadian stimulus. A couple hours after sun sets, when you've been wearing your glasses, you'll start producing melatonin properly. Now, having skin exposed is also an issue because it turns out there's melanopsin in our skin as well. But from my experience, I would say that it's best to start with what the things that you can, that are within reach and easily within reach, and the glasses have the huge bang for the buck. So that's great. If you can make it so that your house doesn't have a bunch of bright lighting and you use candles, or like I use red lights. I have a little red headlamp. Kyle, you can tell people the story if you want. But like, yeah, these are huge improvements you can make instead of having a bunch of bright lights around.
Hey, you know what? The red lights is super easy. You can get them on Amazon for like $2, and they'll send you like 4 of them. Put them in your lamps.
I don't try to sell raw optics because I can't compete with Amazon. They already have the lights.
Yeah. So you can put them in your lamps and everywhere. And I had that when I was in Toronto, and it made such a big difference. But what was fun, I will tell a quick story here. The day that I met Matt, we actually went and watched the sunset and had a beer, and then we were going to go out for a little bit. So I needed to shower because I was surfing earlier. And so I went back to his place. He didn't even know, and the sun was down. He didn't even know where the light switches were in his place. He actually had to feel around, find his headlamp that he puts on, turn it on with the red light, and search to find the light switch so that he could turn it on. He's been staying in his place for a few weeks. So it was absolutely, I was like, what is going on here? But, he teaches this stuff.
I have no idea where the light switches were.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's teaching this stuff, but he's living it too. He's doing it. We didn't really touch on it here, but Matt had some health issues before too. And taking practice with everything he talked about and shared in this episode helped him to overcome some health issues. And so, I mean, that's kind of where his passion roots from. And
talk about that too.
Yeah, we can definitely.
The simple explanation is, like, for the listener, I was having issues from headaches, allergies, and gut issues that were miserable by the time I was about 14 years old. And then I was trying all these diets. I was vegetarian for a while. Then I was paleo, going full on. I went to the most extreme of the paleo diet because they said, oh, you got to find the food that's the food that's triggering your immune system. So do the elimination diet. So I eliminated like everything for a while. All I was eating was bone broth and like cooked meats and well-cooked vegetables. And I wasn't getting better. And then I was trying just every supplement that I could possibly find that I thought would work. And none of it was doing anything for me, really. I was just super depressed, low energy. My issues had improved. Certain issues had kind of improved from cutting all the junk out of my diet. But my energy level was trashed. I ended up with like an eating disorder because I couldn't maintain this diet because I felt like such junk. And then basically, I learned about the light diet. I improved my engines because that was the real problem. It wasn't the food. That's the key to get. And then all of a sudden I started getting better. Now I can eat a wide variety of foods. I can have some ice cream here and there. I can have some carbs. I can eat fruit. And I feel amazing on a daily basis. I mean, I let myself get a little too stressed with my work and stuff, but that's more of a personal mental issue, which the sun won't necessarily fix. That's another thing to note is the last step of the light diet is you have to get your head straight by, meditating, spending time with good people, reading good books, and so on. But point being that when I came to understand from Dr. Kruse primarily, and then reading the work of the researchers that he pieces together and meeting some of them, like Dr. Wallace, like this guy, Dr. Wunsch in Germany, and others who we'll speak about when we talk about the water battery in part 2 and how the sun basically is one of our main energy sources, or is the primary energy source along with food. I was able to move the needle in ways that modern healthcare physicians and even functional medicine practitioners can't, because they're focused on the gas, but they're not even really aware often or speaking about the engine. But if you're not, then you're going to be able to maybe do a lot of stuff and make improvements, but you're always going to hit that wall. But if you learn about light and how it is the key driver of our biology, that's when you can actually move the needle. And if you're just focused on food and supplements, you might make big improvements, but most people are going to hit a wall and not be able to advance. You need to know about light and the engine to be able to move the needle, especially in the cases of serious diseases. So, or just anyone who wants better health. So that's actually like super simple, my story.
Matt, I want to put this into perspective for all the listeners. How old are you?
19.
19 years old. So you just spent an hour and a half, listeners, listening to this guy, Matt, just spit some insane knowledge, some really good information, and talk about how he's transformed, how he feels. Matt is one of the, in my opinion, biggest up-and-comers in the biohacking, if you want to call it that space, in the health space, in this field. I think we are lucky to have him on, lucky to hear, his mind and kind of get this knowledge out of his mind and into ours, because it is some amazing stuff. So Matt, first of all, thank you for joining us in here. Super pumped that I met you here in Bali. Matt, where can people find you? Where can people find you online or wherever? What tell us about your links and social and whatever
100%.
else.
Yeah, 100%. So right now, at The Light Diet on Instagram is where I sort of spend a little bit of time. I'm going to be, over the next several months, posting bits and pieces of more interesting content. I'll be announcing a upcoming course there. So I have a course that'll be on YouTube. I've been starting to make some YouTube videos. People can follow me there, Matt Maruca. So you'll be able to find that, Mattmaruca. That's an Italian last name from my great-grandparents on my dad's side. So that's pretty much YouTube and Instagram will be where I'll be putting out pieces of content. I haven't been putting out too much at this point. I'm more focused on my business, Raw Optics, at the moment, as well as getting a sort of book written where there's sort of a unifying document where people can really, they hear a podcast, they want to re-listen, they want to get all the details. That's where the book's going to come into play. Like, I'm serious, talking like deep step-by-step protocols on how to build the solar callus, even if you're the whitest, palest, sickest of people. And I'm not talking just like my theoretical protocols. I'm sharing the protocols of the guys called heliotherapists who used sunlight to reverse diseases in the 1900s in Europe in clinics. There was a guy named Auguste Rollier who had over 20 clinics in the Swiss Alps and around Europe where they would use sunlight to reverse and heal all of diseases, from severe wounds to tuberculosis, which, believe it or not, the 1903 Nobel Prize in Medicine was given to a Danish guy named Niels Finsen for discovering that sunlight, particularly the ultraviolet spectrum, killed bacteria and was able to cure lupus vulgaris, which is the skin tuberculosis that people got. But after antibiotics were introduced in the 50s, so we were able to kill all these infectious diseases. People basically kind of forgot about the importance of sunlight for health. It was sort of ignored and also pushed away as unscientific by the medicine business, which is now pushing, sunblock and dermatology businesses, which benefit from people who don't get sun, because then your skin looks like junk and you need all these creams and shit that they want to sell. So people can find me there on YouTube and on Instagram. And then for Raw Optics, which is how I'd say at the moment provide the most value to the world, by providing a high quality, attractive blue blocking glasses product, people can check out rawoptics.io, which is our initial site we've been working with for about 18 months. And then you can also go on and check out rawoptics.com and enter your email there. I would definitely recommend people do that, because we're going to have lots of really cool content coming out with the launch of our site on the blog. We have lots of good content already on the site. We have a new line of glasses. We have some new daytime lenses that will be coming out that essentially have a clear. So for people who don't want as much color in their lens, it doesn't block as much as our current daytime yellow lenses, which are a stark yellow tint. But these clearish or near clear lenses have a pretty big impact with not a noticeable tint, which is what I think a lot of people have been looking for. So that's where you can check out our new site. And then on Instagram, we are at raw_optics. And again, that's RA, as in the Egyptian sun god. It's focused on natural light, Ra. So anyhow, that is the light diet in a nutshell.
In a nutshell. Listen, dude, this was friggin' awesome. If you guys don't know, it's about 2 p.m. here in Bali, which means we're missing a lot of the best sunlight right now. So, Matt, what do you say we go surfing and, we get some good sun in right now? I'm a few minutes from you, so I'll hop on my scooter.
I just heard like a thunderstorm cloud
I just heard that too.
Yeah. No, in school in Bali, like us white boys, we only need literally like 15 minutes of sun on us is actually like plenty to drive these processes. I'm talking like you get, 15-30 to an hour in the morning is good, but I'm talking like vitamin D benefit, 15 minutes in the middle of the day with this equatorial sun is actually enough. That just shows a little bit has a huge impact. But if you can get an hour or two, if you can actually assimilate it because you have a good solar catalyst, then you could just be like off to the races. Like one of these big surfer dudes who just looks amazing. It's because they spend all their time in the sun. They work out and they surf, but they have such nice physiques and body comps because their hormones all work properly because they spend their days out in the sun. The best thing about surfing is that you can't wear sunglasses when you surf. Otherwise, you're a mega kook and they're going to be broken in this way. So, yeah.
I love it. All right, Matt, listen, thank you again so much for coming on here. We're going to get an episode 2 sometime soon before we both get out of here. If we ever leave Bali, who knows? But this was awesome, dude. Thank you so much. For everyone, I've put all the links below in the show notes, so check it all out there. Grab your pack or grab your glasses from Raw Optics. You got a discount code, HealthSimple as well. And stay tuned for the next episode with Matt and I. We're going to dive into some more topics, all right? But take it easy, everyone. Thank you.